Hi there, and welcome to today's episode of Cosmic Soul Alignment, where we dive deep into transformative healing and spiritual breakthroughs. In today's conversation, we're exploring a groundbreaking approach to mental health and chronic pain with Beatty Carmichael, an expert in uncovering the spiritual roots of these struggles. So first, a big thank you to today's sponsors. We have Megan North, Voyage of Transcendence and Quantum Awakening for making this episode possible. And a very special thank you to Beatty Carmichael, who paid to be featured on today's show. So Beatty, welcome. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us.
Well, thank you. I'm very excited about being here, Don.
You have a very unique background. And this is such a fascinating approach to healing. So can you walk us through how your journey led you here and what led you to focus on the spiritual side of things?
Yeah, I would love to. So I actually was born into a family of 7 generations of medical doctors, so spanning back almost 200 years. My generation didn't go into medicine. I went into business as a small entrepreneur. And then about 10 years ago, God started to pull me back into the healing side of things. During this time, it's real interesting because in my lineage, and also my father-in-law, who's 20 years deceased right now, but he was an internist for 50 years. And during those years of medical doctors, most of them practiced medicine following a three-leg stool pillar of healthcare. You've got medical, you've got mental, physical, and spiritual. And as my father-in-law would always say, he'll sit you down and say, health is based on mental, physical, and spiritual. And so whatever your issue is, let's talk through these areas. And he would diagnose with a really high level of accuracy what's going on. However, over the last 20 or 30 years, it seems like the healthcare community has lost sight of the spiritual part. And it's now it's either mental or it's physical. And that's just where we're dependent and relying on drugs to solve our problems and things of that sort. So about 9 or 10 years ago, when Creator God started to move me this direction, it was more in a spiritual approach. And I didn't understand it at the time, but he gave me this urge to go pray for people. And I started to, after about 6 months, once I got the guts up, to actually go walk up to strangers and say, hey, looks like you're in pain. Can I pray for you? And that took a lot of guts. But what I started to see is about a third of them were instantly healed. I remember coming back after the first time I did that. I said, Dad, I saw this person. She had degenerative discs in her neck and in her back, and she had arthritis and lupus, and it all disappeared. She was no more in pain. She could move her neck all over the place. And my dad said, oh, that's cool. And then there's this other guy. He's been on opioids for 3 years to control his pain. All of the pain disappeared. He said, oh, that's pretty cool. And then I said, there was this lady with RSD, and all of the RSD left, and she's no longer in pain. What is RSD? And he said, if that happened, that's a miracle. I mean, that's like really caught him. He was explaining that RSD was a neurological disease that was incurable. And that got me on my journey thinking, if it impressed my dad, who is this incredible, almost world-renowned surgeon, then something's going on. And I started to have fun with it. And I started to go back out and just pray for people. Within a year, I was seeing 90% of the people being healed. And what I started to, and when I say healed, all the symptoms disappeared of whatever they were dealing with. Glaucoma, deaf ears, post-surgery wounds, and inflammation, all kinds of pain, anxiety, depression. And over the years, it became obvious through a sense that this Creator God was showing me that all of this was stuff from the spiritual side. They weren't actually physical diseases as the doctor would diagnose it. They were the symptoms of a disease, but it was actually a spiritual entity masquerading as that. Let me see if this makes sense. One of the ways that doctors will diagnose something accurately is they'll say, based on your symptoms, I think it's this. So I'm going to prescribe this therapy because it always gets rid of that issue. And if it gets rid of it, then that was the right diagnosis. So you take this therapy, and if it doesn't work, you can come back to the doctor and say, well, okay, well, it must not have been that. So maybe it's this. In other words, doctors don't really understand until they apply a therapy that's been proven to get rid of a certain disease to know if that's what the issue was. And that's kind of what I'm experiencing here, Don, is people have been diagnosed with something like, like bipolar disorder, anxiety, panic attacks, and depression, and borderline personality disorder. This is one person named Ashlyn. And she's been on medication since she was for probably 20 years now. And she goes through this process of treating it as a spiritual thing. And literally overnight, it all disappears. She goes to her psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist says, well, if you don't have any of these issues going on, you don't need to take the 400 milligrams of your anxiety medicine. You don't need to take all these other things. And she's totally off it because it was a right diagnosis from the symptom, a wrong diagnosis from the source. And that's what kind of thrust me into this, is starting to go down this pathway, seeing people get rid of this, and then over time, understanding there's something spiritual here. And it's shifted me from being an entrepreneur to moving away from that and now moving into, I'm into healthcare, but it's a spiritual version of healthcare now.
The doctors just don't look deeper than the physical body most of the time, and it's very, very sad. It is very sad.
Well, the sad part is it's not the doctor's fault. This is the thing that's really hit me. When my grandfather came along, and my father-in-law, and before them, doctors were sole practitioners, and they experimented to see what would work and how to better treat their patient. But over the last 20 or 30 years, it seems like the medical care has shifted and has abrogated, if that's the right word, the responsibility for healthcare to the pharmaceutical companies. And so now we take the medical care takes their orders and their instructions and their teaching from a system that's turned atheistic. There is no spiritual component. It all has to be done through science. And that's, so the doctors today, they're just not taught it. And I think it's more of a system issue than a doctor issue.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think they take into account that really everything manifests itself physically, right? If there's an imbalance mentally, emotionally, spiritually, then the only way we can get the attention on it is to throw something out physically, because that's where we'll notice it.
Yeah.
But yeah, then they're not looking to treat the root cause. They're just looking to treat the symptoms. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a big knife wound. It's not really going to do any good whatsoever. So tell us a bit about what you found then. Because did you say that you had like a 90% success rate?
Yeah. So finding.
Was that right away, or did that take some time to build up?
So I'll tell you the secret of what happened. So we're actually talking on two different things, but they all lead to the same. One was a supernatural gift of healing that Creator God gave me. And I would pray for people for healing, and it would instantly be healed. Later, He took that gift away. Now, if I pray for you, nothing's going to happen because I no longer have a supernatural gift. He gave me the gift as training wheels to teach me the deeper root of true healing from the spiritual realm. And now what I do is I lead people into understanding, having understood how the spiritual realm works in terms of the dark energy spirits that manifest as issues in our lives, how to turn them off and get rid of them, and now receive healing that way. But back to the point that you're asking on the 90%. So I'm actually saying 90% both ways. The first time I saw 90% was with my supernatural gift of healing. And as I prayed for people, it was only about a third of the people until one thing happened. I ended up fasting. So I go out on Saturday mornings at that time to pray for people at Walmart. And on this particular time, it was about a year after I started this, I fasted all day Friday. So I ate dinner Thursday night, water only all the way through Friday. And I said, I wonder what fasting does in this prayer for healing. So I kept my fast up for about 36 hours into Saturday morning when I would go pray for people. And I saw 3 times more healings, more dramatic, more powerful, quicker, things I've never seen before up to that point. And I go, wow, what just happened? And I went back and said, what did I do different? I said, it was fasting. So I tested it a couple of times. I would go out without fasting, and I was at 30%. With fasting, I was at 90%. And so I never went back out without fasting for about 30 hours, 36 hours before praying for people. So that was the first thing that took me to the 90% mark. Then it was about 3 years ago, Don, where I was going back out. I prayed for some people at Walmart, 90% healing. I went back out 2 weeks later, and it was like crickets, like maybe 10%, maybe. And it was so startling. I actually went back to God and I said, well, what happened? He said, I took away your gift of healing. I said, why did you do that? It was helping so many people. Like I was seeing like 100 people a year just being healed, going out just on 1 or 2 weekends a month. And he said, because now I want you to learn to do it by authority. And I understood when he said authority, I understood exactly what he meant, because during this time he'd been showing me that the spiritual forces in our lives have a legal right, an authority to be in our lives based on things that we did that violated his standards. So real quick background, he places into us a conscience. And in that conscience, he writes his laws of right and wrong, good and bad. And that becomes our conscience. So this is why if we do something that's bad and no one's told us it's bad, we feel guilty about it. And if we do something really good and we feel elated, yay, no one has to tell us that we did good. It was in our conscience. And so our conscience is like this moral compass that's driving us. As long as we don't screw it up, we can rip the conscience out if we're not careful. And now we have no compass. But as long as we try to obey that compass and follow this higher direction toward love toward everyone, then it guides us. And when we violate that, it gives a legal right to one of these dark energy type of spirits to enter our life and then to create havoc in little pieces of our life that starts to destroy the quality of our life. And what I started to understand is the process of how to remove that authority from those spirits and get them out of our life. And when they got out, then the symptoms of pain, mental illness, addictions, whatever it was, would disappear. So as I went back out and led people through this process, where now it was no longer me praying for them, it was me guiding them in a non-religious prayer that eliminates that legal right from the spirits. I saw immediately right back up to 90% of the people praying for themselves were being instantly healed of the symptoms. The symptoms totally disappear, indicating it wasn't a medical disease to begin with. It was a spiritual issue, right? Mm-hmm. And the other thing really interesting, Dawn, is I saw more dramatic things than I've ever seen before. So it's like each step up, it's the range of the things that were being people recovering from got wider and wider and more expansive. So that's the 90%. I know you didn't realize there were two 90% in there, but that's how
I wasn't
those
thinking
2 90.
Of that, no.
Yeah. So it's
interesting.
Yeah, and let me tell you, as just right up front. So then, as I'm out there, I'm praying for these people at Walmart. I kept running into these women from an addiction recovery center, and it seems like whatever they had going on, this Creator God really just loved them and was healing them all the time when I prayed for them. And a lot of times they were some of the employees and management people over at the center. So they invited me to teach there. This was several years back now. And so I've been a volunteer teacher, and it's one of the largest addiction recovery centers in America. They house over 500 women. And what I'm seeing with this, as I started to write my book, The Prayer of Freedom, I wanted to statistically measure how effective it was when someone did it entirely on their own. Because up to that point, I was leading everyone in it and kind of helping diagnose what to pray about through this process. But I created a systematic approach. I identified about 18 different categories where we violate our conscience and we open up a legal right doorway to these dark energy spirits. And so I created in my book a worksheet in the back that allows someone to go through and make a list of things that they remember in these different categories, and then a structured approach of how do you pray to this creator God to turn off these legal rights and actually nullify them in your life. So I gave, at that time I was teaching 3 classes, I gave all the students in my classes the worksheet and the prayer process and said, do this on your own. And then let's report back to me. So in this process, I had each of these ladies fill out a sheet that I call an issue grid. Let me see if I can throw this up for your viewers. So the issue grid is just a blank sheet of paper that they write down all the issues that they're dealing with. And then initially they would indicate the intensity level on a 0 to 10 level. And then at the end of the process, they would then regrade it sorry, I'm trying to do this on the camera.
Oh, that's good. Mm-hmm.
So let me just read you one of them. This is kind of a standard. This lady had a little bit more than most, but this is the range of stuff that they were reporting. So on this issue grid is, do you feel heaviness, like you feel like a heavyweight backpack that you're carrying through life? And this lady, she rated it a 10. Darkness in your mind, everything dark, a 10. Bipolar type 1 and 2, she wrote, it was a 10. Depression was a 10 for her. Anxiety, a 10. Voices in her head, a 10. Arthritis in her hips, a 10. Arthritis in her back, a 10. She is really bad off. Knee pain, back pain, restless leg, all of those were 10. COPD, neuropathy, they were a 10. Pornography, addiction to pornography and addiction to drugs were a 10. So after 30 days of doing this, everything on her list went down to a 2 or 3, with the one exception of cigarettes, and that remained a 10. She was one of the failures of my test. Watch this. So what I did is I gave them the list, and I had them grade the intensity right now before they did it. I pulled back the list. I gave them the worksheet that they went through on their own, did their prayer on their own, and then from there, I had them go through the system and pray through it. And then at the end of the month, I had them relist what they were going through, their intensity. 87% of the women, everything on their list went to 0. That's why I call this one a failure. Only went down to 2 or 3. An 80% drop. For me, it was a failure because it wasn't complete. Now, it was really great for her. I'm not saying it's a failure, but 87% of them, they all went to 0, with a very few exceptions of those that they had one thing maybe every now and then. So I wanted to read you just a thank you note, because I want your listeners to understand the range of what this spiritual approach to our human conditions can actually produce. This is a typical response that I saw and continue to see in my class. This is a lady named Catherine, and listen to all the things that she was dealing with and what happened. She said, I want to thank you for the prayer of freedom. It has changed my life. Growing up, my relationship with my mom was really tough. She was abusive, and she and my stepdad would drink and get into lots of fights. By the time I was in 7th grade, she said she didn't want anything to do with me and left. That's when life began spiraling downward. By 16 years old, I was having sex with lots of boys and started getting into drugs. That was just over 10 years ago. Before doing this prayer, I was addicted to heroin and fentanyl and meth. I had a lot of worry and stress and anxiety. On a scale of 1 to 10, they were probably an 8. I've had constant allergies and sinus headaches for years, migraines 5 out of 7 days a week, and a super heavy feeling like I was carrying around an overweight backpack every day. Life has really been difficult. So she has everything that usually probably 5 people have, just little individual pieces. It's all concentrated in her. But watch what happens with this simple process of the prayer of freedom. She said, but the prayer of freedom and going through this process changed everything. Literally everything is gone. No more sinus issues, all gone. No more headaches and migraines, all gone. No more heaviness, it's all gone. No more anxiety or stress or worries. Literally on a scale of 1 to 10, they've all gone to 0. Even my addictions have gone down to 0. I don't want drugs anymore. I have no urges for them anymore. And even the thought of any drug disgusts me. It's all gone. All of those had been diagnosed as a medical or mental condition. And the symptom was properly diagnosed, but the source was wrong because they were all a spiritual condition. Because all she did is she went through and handled it as breaking the standard in our conscience, nullifying that legal right of those dark energy spirits. They left and everything cleared up.
It's fascinating what you're saying there. The violations, you're saying that that's what opens up the
That's what
right for
opens
the dark energy to come in. Yeah, how do you know that there's dark energy there? Is it just because of the symptoms, the mental or the physical symptoms
Yeah,
that
so
people are
here's a good way.
experiencing?
The good way to assess dark energy versus light energy. If it's good and you're elated and you're full of joy, that's light energy. If it's heavy and it takes away quality of life and you're hurting and you got anguish, that's dark, right? I mean, if you love it, it's light. If you hate it, it's dark. It's pretty simple. So I don't have any other way of recognizing it because there's good and evil in the spiritual realm that manifests in the physical. Good always brings forth good. And anytime you have anxiety or depression, bipolar disorder, addictions, chronic pain, relationship breakups, or all kinds of fights, that's not good. That's bad, right? So it's dark. So that's how I know whether it's dark or light. It's just based on, is it good or bad?
How do you recognize which violation it's been so that you can
Ah,
pray over it?
yeah. So this is what took me the longest time to do. For demonstration purposes, I now do something very simple. We just ask this Creator God precisely what was the issue. But in the demonstration purpose, it's not always permanent. It will frequently return because it's just a demonstration approach, but it shows the concept. But the full approach, what happens is we don't know what are these, I call them legal rights. We don't know what is the legal right for these spirits, but we know that the legal right, let me back up. This will be really interesting for you and your listeners. I want to share how I discovered what the legal right was originally. Okay. So, do you believe in demonic spirits? Do you know
I
what
would
a
have to
demonic?
say, yeah, I know what you mean. My belief, no.
Okay. So, so this is going to be a really interesting segment right now. Um, I've pulled my data of the spiritual laws out of the ancient Bible text because it seems to be highly accurate when it talks about spiritual laws, and then I test them and apply them, and they've been tested true. And one of the ancient Bible texts says that we do not battle against people of flesh and blood, but against persons without bodies. So if you think about us, we are a spiritual soul and we're a physical body, but our person is our soul. It's our soul that contains our mind, will, emotions, and personality. Our body is just a bunch of chemicals and liquids that we move around in this earthly realm with, okay? So who we are is our body. What this ancient text says, it comes out of an ancient book called Ephesians, chapter 6, verse 12. And what it says is that our battle is not against people like you and me, but against a person, a soul that has no body. Call it a disembodied soul, if you want to call it that. Mm-hmm. And my first experience with this, I had a lady call me up that I'd met at Walmart and helped pray over. She said, I have these dark spirits, demonic spirits talking to me in my head and bothering me. Will you come get them out? And so I said, okay. So I came over and I asked Creator God, if there are these spirits there, bring the first one up I need to deal with. And literally what happened is she goes into a trance. Her person goes out, but another person takes over her body and looks at me with different eyes, different voice, different personality, started heckling me. And as I would interrogate it, I was asking, what is your legal right to be in Alexis? Because this is a different person. And the legal right, 100% of the time for everyone that I interrogated, was always violating God's standards somewhere. Then, as I started to deal with this, I learned how to do it less scary for the person. It's kind of scary if some being takes over your body and they're talking through your mouth and you don't. It's like, what's in the world is going on? So I started next to lead people. I would forbid the spirit to take over the body, and they could only speak to the person's mind. And so now the person that I would be ministering to would relay what they're hearing in their mind. And this is how it works. So, like the occult is a dark energy arena. And the one of the spirits that came up with this one guy, I said, his name was Seth. I said, Josh is the guy, and I said, Spirit, identify yourself. And Josh says, I hear this name Seth in my mind. I said, okay, Seth, is that you? Yes. Okay, so I'm now having this conversation through Josh as he's relaying. I said, what is your role there? He said, my role is the gatekeeper. In the spiritual realm, the gatekeeper is a low-level spirit with a high responsibility. He opens the spiritual gates of that person and starts to invite other spirits in, okay? And these dark energy spirits. And I said, what is your legal right? He said, Josh played with a Ouija board at 7 years old. And Josh said, I didn't want anything to do with it. My sister was playing with it. She communicated with me, but it was a dark art. And he was watching that thing move and spelling out the letters. And that one moment, less than 60 seconds, opened a door for this dark energy spirit that's a person without a body to come in. And his life had been wrecked now he was 32, so that's 25 years. And other spirits had come in because of that. So not everything that we deal with is this person without a body, what the ancient Bible text calls a demonic spirit. I've identified 3 categories of spirits. I know there's more. In the spiritual realm, it's sort of like the earthly realm. You have dogs and cats and elephants and zebras. You got all kinds of things, right? And there's probably even more than that in the spiritual realm. But in the spiritual realm, I've identified that there are 3 types of these dark energy spirits that we're dealing with. The worst of them is that demonic type that is an actual person without a body that will come in, and their whole purpose is simply to sabotage your life. The other ones are much more benign. One is called, these are my terms, an amplifier spirit. So think about this. If you get really angry at someone, you blow up in anger, it seems like now you open the door to one of these amplifying spirits of anger. And all it does is it amplifies your existing anger. And now you can't let go of anger. This is what addiction is most of the time. It amplifies it. Like just yesterday, I was at the Addiction Recovery Center when I was teaching. This gal had been smoking for years, and she transferred to vaping, and she couldn't get rid of it. She wanted to stop, but she couldn't stop. This is the typical thing with addictions, with addicts. I don't want to do it, but I can't resist not doing it. And I led her in this process. Go back to when it all began, because that's usually the open door. And she went back to where it began. She was 10 years old, I believe. And she nullified it at that point, and instantly she no longer had interest to vape. That was 2 weeks ago. She hadn't vaped ever since. And even executive director at this recovery center was surprised. Wow, it's completely stopped because people are stuck on cigarettes and all kinds of addictions. But you go back to where you open the door. So you have amplifiers that amplify urges. So it's usually a one-to-one. You start to get a pornography addiction, a spirit. Now there's an amplification for pornography. An alcohol addiction, amplification for alcohol. Fear, like trauma hits you, amplification. Now you're always in fear, anxiety. Okay, so they're just amplifiers, and the more you give in to that amplification, the stronger it gets, and it becomes just overpowering. The third type of category of what I'm finding is what I'll call an infirmity spirit, or an infirmity energy source. And its whole purpose is it takes something that you do where you violate this conscience, but then it creates a physical malady. It's either pain in your body, it's asthma, maybe it's an allergy, it's something like that, sinus issues, where it's not like you broke the law, violated something in your sinus and now it comes in a sinus like you do with anger. But it's where you do something and now it manifests something as an infirmity in your body. So those are the three type spirits. A demonic spirit, you have an amplifying spirit, and then you have a infirmity spirit. All of them are basically dark energy to a degree, but the demonic is definitely absolutely dark.
Oh, that's exceptionally interesting. I'm going to have to watch this back again to get all these nuggets you're throwing out. It's fascinating. Now's a good time. Let's just take a quick break. But after the break, I want to ask you more about these violations and get some more examples of them. Because when you said, was it Josh or the young one had played with a Ouija board? I played with a Ouija board, I think it was at 12 or 13. The whole family did. I'm like that, oh no.
Yeah, that's a big open door. Yeah.
Oh, dear me. Okay. Well, maybe you could give some advice about that later. Hold on. Just
Okay.
stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Cosmic Soul Alignment. I'm here today with Beatty Carmichael, and we are talking about rewriting the diagnosis, the medical diagnosis. And we've had a fascinating conversation, actually. You've given us some amazing information. But I really would like to talk more about these violations, Creator God violations. And you had mentioned before the break there about Josh and the occult violation by playing with a Ouija board completely innocently, but you don't have to do it deliberately. It's all in innocence when you're a child, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can you give us an example of some other violations?
Yeah. So let's see. One of the biggest violations. So the top three.
Mm.
Okay. This covers probably 80% of all people's issues. Number one is unforgiveness. And unforgiveness is a huge violation simply by someone forgiving someone in their past. I've seen legally blind eyes instantly become 20/20 vision. I've seen migraines disappear. I've seen sciatica pain that's been there for 10 or 12 years disappear. I've seen um, allergies go. There's cancer that goes, neuropathy that's been in someone's body for 15 years instantly disappear. And I've seen rheumatoid arthritis. So what you find is, so all of these are infirmity spirits. I call them infirmity spirits. I use ancient Bible terms and they call all these things spirits. You have a spirit of peace, you have a spirit of skill, you have a spirit of fear, you have a spirit of lying. It's like a spirit is something that amplifies, I guess. I'm not sure. But it's a spiritual entity that attaches to us. And so all of these things are manifest through an infirmity spirit. The number two issue that is an open door is sexual activity outside of marriage, because this Creator God is very adamant that marriage is that sexual activity should be between a husband and wife, and this is in the ancient Bible text. And what it says is that when a man and woman come together, they become one. It's not just a physical oneness of connection, but there's a spiritual oneness. In fact, the Bible goes so far to say in the ancient texts of the Old Testament that if a man were to lay with a virgin, they've already married and he has to marry her, because in the spiritual realm, they're already married. So what happens with that is, and the reason sexual activity outside of marriage is so big in this is anytime the person that you're sleeping with has these legal rights, open doors in their life to these dark energy spirits, then when you sleep with that person, you become one. So that person's legal rights all become your legal rights as well. So this is why if you've ever slept with someone who's dealing with depression or anxiety or anger issues or addictions, and after sleeping with them, you start to pick up the same issues, it's because it comes through that. We talk a lot about STDs in the medical community, sexually transmitted disease, and how safe sex can help prevent that. But to be kind of silly on this, uh, you can't protect against STD, sexually transmitted demon, right?
Mhm.
Because it's a spiritual union and a spiritual connection that whatever that person is dealing with, you inherit those legal rights. It doesn't, in fact, here's something really interesting. A lot of times they happen quickly. A friend of mine was dealing with a guy who was manic depression for years. And she said, "Tell me how all this started." He said, "I don't know. I was the happiest guy you could find in college. I slept with this gal who'd been date raped. She was manic depressive, and it feels like I got what she had." And that's exactly what it was. They went back to that root, flipped it off, and his depression left. Another lady, my same friend who was sharing that story, she was working on hospice care. And there was this 49-year-old woman named Madeline, and she was dying with Parkinson's. And Parkinson, you can't move your muscles. And at this point, she had about 6 weeks left to live, they anticipated. And all she could move is one pinky on her hand. She couldn't move anything else. All the color left her body. And my friend Phyllis was asking her, "How did you catch Parkinson's?" And in a very faint whisper, Madeline was saying, "You can't catch Parkinson's. If you could, you wouldn't be in this room with me today." She said, "My husband had it, and after he died, I was diagnosed with it." So Phyllis, understanding these spiritual laws and legal rights, she said, "Did you ever sleep with your husband before you got married?" And Madeline said, "Yes, but what in the world does that have to do with anything?" And Phyllis started to explain how the sexual activity outside of marriage creates an open door. And that what probably was going on is that Parkinson's disease was actually a dark spirit manifesting the symptoms of Parkinson. And once it killed your husband, because it had an open door legal right to you, it moved over to you. So Phyllis led her into the same process that my whole book, Prayer of Freedom, the whole worksheet process is tied to, and pinpointing that exact spot, and led her to nullify that open door. When Phyllis came back 1 week later, Madeline was sitting up in bed, all the color back. They were just chit-chatting. So she has full control of her muscles to sit up and talk. And then when Phyllis came back the third time, which is 2 weeks after the first visit, Madeline wasn't there. She went to the nurse's station and said, "Where's Madeline?" She said, "Oh, we discharged her earlier this week." So she went from deathbed to walking out of there on her own, simply by applying a spiritual solution to what appeared to be a disease, and it was just a spiritual thing. But all that came through the sexual activity outside of marriage. I have another friend, I was leading through this, and his hands were just always shaking. His name was Roger. I said, "Roger, why are your hands shaking?" "I don't know. They just always been shaking for years." He's 45. I said, "Well, when did they start?" "I was in college sometime." I said, "Well, do you have unforgiveness for anyone back there?" "No." "Have you ever slept with someone outside of marriage back then?" "Oh, yeah." He said, "I was an alcohol salesman, and we would go to all the bars and all the sex bars too. And I partook of some of the women at the sex bars. So I led him into just breaking those things, and all of a sudden his hands completely stop. It was a spiritual torment tied to having slept with those girls outside of marriage. The third main category is the occult. Anything in the dark arts. And the dark arts, the best way to describe dark art is anything that is contrary to Creator God. Anything that bypasses Creator God to get to a similar root. In other words, Creator God says, let's see, how can I hate to say it this way, but this is the only thing coming to mind, so I'm going to say it. I've learned that sometimes he puts these thoughts here for a reason. Throughout the Bible, ancient Bible texts, you have this kind of dance going on between Creator God and this nation called Israel that he says, "You are my bride," and it's only and he says that I have married you, right? And this is where the ancient covenant begins, where if you've ever heard of the Ten Commandments and that type of stuff, all of that's tied into this picture that you see in these ancient texts. And the idea is Israel keeps whoring after other gods and not after Creator God, and Creator God gets real jealous, and he calls it prostitution, that you're having other lovers, okay? So using that same analogy and metaphor, and I hope I'm not going awry on this one, but I'm just going to say what he's putting in my mind. You have a husband and wife, and they should partake of each other for their sexual pleasure. But if one of them goes outside of that to partake of sexual pleasure that's not of their spouse, that's wrong. And so when we deal with trying to access the spiritual side of things and answers and solutions outside of going directly to Creator God, but we go through other channels, Creator God sees that the same as he sees a man and a woman with a spouse going outside of the marriage to receive their sexual pleasure. He sees it as the same thing. And so for him, it's just like sexual activity outside of marriage, real bad. The occult is spiritual activity outside of Creator God. That's kind of what the occult is, and that's what makes it so dark. But those are the three primary things. Then you have other things like you have, I call them word curses. A lot of people say it's your thinking, your thoughts, where you think something negative about yourself. Like someone says, you're going to be a drunk just like your dad. And they're grown up with the mom always say, "You're going to be just like your dad, and you're going to be a drunk." And now they turn into be a alcoholic drunk. And it's a word curse. It's something spoken But because what's spoken by our physical mouth is actually also simultaneously spoken into the spirit realm through our soul, that it creates powerful implications. And that implication opens up a door for a spirit to come in and fulfill whatever we spoke or whatever we believe. Here's an interesting example to understand what I mean by a word curse. One of the ladies that I was praying for, this is when I had a gift of healing. Actually, no, this was not the gift of healing. This was all going through this process. She was in a wheelchair for 11 years, and I led her through this process that I've now systematized in the Prayer of Freedom of trying to identify these open doors. What open door may have caused a spirit of torment to be in her foot where she couldn't walk? And it was something that happened back in high school. She's 73 years old, so this was 55 years ago. And she had taken a secret oath, and she didn't really know what it was said, but apparently it was against Creator God. It's on the dark side of things. So she renounced that secret oath, and instantly the pain in her foot left. She got out of the wheelchair and started walking around, and it lasted for 3 weeks, and then it comes back. And I was asking Creator God, what just happened? I thought we got rid of the right. And Creator God said, you did. But something happened in the last 3 weeks that gave it another legal right to return. And He placed in my heart what I thought it was. So here's what I did. I called up Francis, and she's out of state. And I said, Francis, I think I know what's going on, but let's test it. The pain level in her foot while she's in the wheelchair is an 8. Okay. And we tried to get rid of that spirit just by normal means, and nothing happened. And then I said, Francis, I think what happened is this. You've been in pain for so long that you created an identity of being in pain. And that identity is a word curse, because now you're believing something that's contrary to what Creator God did for you. He said, I've released you from that, but now you feel like you still ought to be in pain. And it's usually unconscious. So I led her to renounce that. I renounced my identity of being in pain. And instantly the pain left. So that's a word curse. So those are 4 examples of how these open doors work.
Definitely going to have to get that book and do a lot more reading here. Very interesting to me. It's opened my eyes up. Seeing things a very, very different way through different eyes, fresh eyes. It's always nice. I want to ask you, how do you deal with skeptics? I'm sure you'll have come across some people that are really skeptical about the whole process.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that?
Let me share an actual story from just a couple of months ago on a show I did. I was talking about this. It was a husband and wife team as a host. Josh is the husband, and he's the skeptic. He was basically saying, not quite these words, but I don't believe this, right? I prayed and prayed and prayed, and I've had this pain in my hips and knees for over 10 years, and it's never been healed. And he's a Christian. He goes to church and thinking, okay, all I have to do is pray to God, and He will heal me if it's His will. He hasn't healed me. You can't pray differently because there's not a secret formula to prayer. And so I don't believe any of this. So he's the skeptic. I said, well, let's just role play. Let me guide you through this. And in 5 minutes, his pain was instantly gone. And now he's not a skeptic. So the way I deal with skeptics is prove it. I mean, this is a scientific process. This isn't religion. This isn't whether you believe it's going to work or not, and if you believe it, it'll actually work, and if you don't believe it, it doesn't. It's a process. It's a law, right? Just like gravity is a law, whether you believe it or not, it's going to work. The spiritual authority is a law. Whether you believe it or not, it works, either against you or for you. Most of the time, it's been against us. Now all you have to do is reverse it and make that law work for you so you can get freedom. Hence the name, the prayer of freedom. And all prayer is our spoken word that impacts the spiritual realm. That's all prayer really is.
And now we have to be extra careful that we don't get this energy transference from others. We've got to be extra careful now.
Yeah. Well, if you have all your doors are closed, you can't get any negative energy anyway. So close all your doors, and then you're protected.
Great. Last question, because we've only got a couple of minutes left. So if somebody's watching today and very interested, and they're maybe feeling down or depressed, or they have some addictions, for example, what would be the message that you would want to give them today?
The most important message is there is still hope. It doesn't matter how many things you've tried and how many things have failed. Because if you haven't tried to solve the actual root of the problem, then everything you've tried has been a misdiagnosed treatment. And what I'm finding is if it's a spiritual root, then the prayer freedom process is almost 100% successful in getting it out. It's 90% successful overall with everyone because almost everything we deal with is a spiritual root. So let me encourage you, if you go to my website, you'll see it above my head, theprayeroffreedombook.com. Watch some of the videos. I've got a number of videos of just testimonials of people that are true miraculous videos. You'll see things that medical science cannot explain because it doesn't happen in the physical. It's a supernatural healing of removing all the way from recent surgery wounds, broken bones being instantly healed, motion being fully restored back in a shoulder that was locked tight, and all kinds of things. So whether it's addiction, whether it's mental illness, whether it's chronic pain, whether it's constant relationship breakup in your family, check it out at theprayerfreedombook.com and just go through the step-by-step process. It takes just a little bit of time, and it is highly effective.
How can people get the book? Just from
Uh,
your website, or
yeah,
they can get it on Amazon, or?
yeah, so because there are a lot of books named Prayer and Freedom somewhere in there, theprayerfreedombook.com is the best place because there's a buy now button that takes you straight to Amazon globally. So regardless of where you are, you'll get the correct book and you won't get the wrong book.
And a question just that I want to ask you, is it on Kindle?
Yes, it's also on Kindle.
I'm very happy about that then.
Great.
Sold.
Sold.
Okay. Do you have a last message that you would like to, or anything you'd
Uh,
like to add before we
yeah,
finish up?
give it a try. And the other cool thing, if you have a loved one that's suffering, because of how the spiritual laws work, you can actually apply these spiritual laws on their behalf and start to free them, even if they're unable or unwilling to do it on their own. So go in and get the book, apply it towards them, and you'll start to see changes. I've seen, as people have gone through this, I've seen changes in their children. One lady, her children, 1 and 3, had asthma. As she went through this process herself, the kid's asthma disappeared because it was a spiritual issue coming down through her. So there's just a lot of things there. You'll find a lot of hope here.
Okay. A huge thank you to you, Beatty, for sharing that wisdom with us today. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and that time just flew in. Your insights give us such a much deeper understanding of healing and transformation. So thank you so much. And to our viewers, thank you for tuning in. Until next time, keep aligning your cosmic soul. Thank you so much, Beatty. Take care.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed it.
Bye now.